Once upon a time, because all the best stories begin with once upon a time, we've reached the story of Cinderella. This is the old version of Cinderella, so it's not exactly the one that you'll probably be familiar with. Once upon a time, there was a happy family. The father was rich and prosperous. He ran a good business. The daughter was beautiful and the apple of her parents' eye. But the mother fell ill, and as she lay on her bed, knowing that time was running out for her, she said to her daughter, "Tend my grave for me when I am gone." So when the time came, the little girl went to her mother's grave every day. Time passed, tears healed, and father married again. And he married a lady who had two daughters who were fair of face but dark of heart. And the stepmother and the stepsisters were jealous of the daughter, and they set her to work in the kitchen. They took away her beautiful clothes and gave her a shabby, grey, shapeless dress to wear. She slept on the hearthrug in front of the kitchen fire, so she was always covered in ash. So after a while they took away her name and called her Cinderella, little one of the ashes. And there came a time when the father had to go away for business, as men do. And he said to the three girls, "What can I bring you back from my travels?" And the first stepsister said, "A fine dress, so I can show off my beauty." And the second stepsister said, "A fine necklace, so people will see how beautiful my slim neck is." But Cinderella, his own daughter, said, "Bring me simply a twig from a tree that you find on your way." So when he returned, he presented Cinderella with a hazel twig, which she took to her mother's grave and planted it there. And after some time, the little twig took root and grew into a lovely hazel tree. And hazels, of course, are a symbol of wisdom. And in the tree there lived a white bird, and the white bird became Cinderella's friend as she visited the tree. A proclamation was announced. The prince needed a bride. There were to be 3 magnificent balls held at the prince's palace. Everyone was invited. The stepmother and the stepsisters became very excited and went to a lot of effort to choose beautiful dresses and beautiful jewellery. And they looked at Cinderella and said, "Of course you can't come with us. You can't come in that shabby grey smock of yours." And Cinderella pleaded, for she so wanted to go to the ball. So her stepmother took a bag of lentils and emptied them out into the ash of the fire in the kitchen and said, "Pick out every lentil, and then I will think about it." So Cinderella spoke to the white bird that lived in the hazel tree, and the white bird brought lots of other birds with her, and they picked out every single lentil from the ashes in the hearth. But Cinderella presented her stepmother with the bowl of lentils, and her stepmother said, "But you have nothing to wear, my dear, and you would be embarrassing to us, and anyway, you don't know how to dance." So the stepmother and the two stepsisters flounced off in their fine clothes to go to the ball, leaving Cinderella alone in the kitchen. So she went to her mother's grave and spoke to the tree, and told the tree all her problems and all her worries. And from the high branches of the tree fell down a beautiful dress, the colour of copper, and with matching shoes. It's, of course, very important to have coordinated accessories. The story doesn't actually say whether the tree gave her the matching handbag and matching hair accessories, but you kind of assume it did. So Cinderella went home, washed herself and brushed her hair, and put on the copper-coloured dress and the copper-coloured shoes, and adorned her hair as best she could. And she went to the ball, and everyone's eyes were drawn to her, drawn by her beauty and her own sweet nature. And she danced every dance with the prince, who would take no other partner. When the time came for the ball to end, the prince was curious as to who the father of this beautiful and lovely lady really was. So he followed her out of the palace. And Cinderella ran home and climbed up into her father's dovecot and hid there. But when the father went to look inside the dovecot, it was empty, for Cinders had managed to climb down the other side. And by the time everyone came home, and everyone was talking about the beautiful stranger that the prince had danced with, and how he had ignored the two sisters, Cinderella was back in her grey smock, asleep on the hearthrug. The second night there was another ball, and Cinderella went to her mother's grave and spoke to the hazel tree. And this time the hazel tree gave her a rich and beautifully embroidered dress, the colour of silver, with matching shoes. And Cinderella went to the ball, and once again the prince danced with her, and only her, and no one knew who the beautiful stranger was. And once again Cinderella managed to run out of the palace and reach her home. And by the time everyone else reached home, she was pretending to be asleep, lying on the hearthrug in her old grey smock. The third night, Cinderella went to the tree, and the tree gave her an even richer, even more beautiful dress. And of course, this time it was the colour of gold, and the slippers were the colour of gold. But the prince by now was so desperate to find out who this amazing lady was that he ordered his servants to cover the steps of the palace with pitch. So when Cinderella ran out of the palace, one of her shoes caught on the pitch. So the prince was left with a tiny little gold slipper belonging to his beloved. So he travelled throughout the kingdom looking for the lady whose foot would fit such a tiny little slipper. She came to the house of Cinderella's father, and there the stepmother saw an opportunity, and she said to her oldest daughter, "Take this knife, cut off your toes so that your foot will fit the slipper." So the oldest daughter cut off her toes and squeezed her foot inside the slipper, and blood began to ooze through the satin. And a little white bird who lived in the hazel tree flew in through the window and sang to the prince, "There is blood on the slipper, she is not your bride." And the prince, of course, listened to the bird and looked at the blood on the slipper and realised it was true. Then the mother passed the knife to the second stepsister, and she cut off her heel and squeezed her foot inside the slipper. And once again the white dove sang to the prince that there was blood on the heel of the slipper, and that this wasn't his true love. So Cinder was sent for, and when Cinderella climbed up the steps from the basement kitchen and saw her prince, I suspect there was a flash as their eyes met. And of course her tiny little foot fitted the slipper perfectly. But I think the prince knew that this woman in the grey, drab, ash-coloured smock was the lady who had captured his heart. So they were married quite soon after. And as the stepsisters walked into the church, the older sister stood on the left and the younger sister stood on the right. And the white dove flew down and pecked out a left eye and pecked out a right eye. And then as the sisters walked out of the church, the younger sister stood on the left and the older sister stood on the right. And the white bird flew down and pecked out their other eyes. So they spent the rest of their lives living in darkness as punishment for their evil deeds, while Cinderella married her handsome prince, and the two of them lived happily ever after. The basic Cinderella format, there are something like 300 versions of that story. It possibly originates in China, hence the thing about a beautiful woman is someone with very small, presumably bound feet. There is a version of that where the wicked stepmother is given shoes of red hot iron to wear at Cinderella's wedding, and because she's wearing shoes of red hot iron, she dances and dances until she dances herself to death. But of course, Cinderella always lives happily ever after with her handsome prince. I hope you find your happy ever after too. So I hope to see you again. Lots more stories coming up. Please think about subscribing if you haven't already. And there is a Brothers Grimm Facebook group if you'd like to join that and maybe say something about the Brothers Grimm stories. See you again soon.